No one had entered the library in 40 years, yet every night its windows glowed with golden light. The town of Millbrook had grown accustomed to mysteries. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were currency, and where the past never truly died. But the old library on Maple Street was different. It stood at the edge of town like a forgotten monument, its red brick facade covered in ivy, its iron gate rusted shut. And every night, without fail, warm light spilled from its tall windows. Sarah Mitchell had noticed it first on a Tuesday evening in late October. She'd been driving home from her job at the town's only bookstore when she passed Maple Street and saw it. That unmistakable glow, soft and inviting, as if someone inside was reading by lamplight. She slowed her car, craning her neck to get a better look. The building had been abandoned since before she was born. Everyone said so. The town council had declared it unsafe decades ago, after the last librarian disappeared without a trace. But there it was. Light. Sarah told herself it was probably just kids with flashlights, urban explorers looking for thrills. She drove on, but the image stayed with her. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The library had always fascinated her, even as a child. Her grandmother used to tell stories about it, about how it had once been the heart of Millbrook, a place where people came not just for books, but for answers. The next evening, Sarah drove past again. The light was there, steady and warm. She pulled over this time, parking across the street. For 20 minutes, she sat in her car, watching. The windows revealed nothing but that golden glow, no shadows moving behind the glass, no flicker of candles or lamps. Just light, constant and unexplained. On Thursday, she brought her camera. She took photos from every angle, zoomed in on the windows. But when she reviewed them later at home, the images showed only darkness. The building looked dead in her photographs, as lifeless as it had been for 40 years. Yet she'd seen the light with her own eyes. She was certain of it. But what she couldn't know was that the library had been waiting for her all along. Friday came, and with it a restless energy Sarah couldn't shake. She'd always been curious, perhaps too curious for her own good. Her mother used to say she asked too many questions, wanted too many answers. But wasn't that what life was about? Understanding, knowing? She spent the day at work distracted, rearranging books she'd already organized, recommending titles without really listening to customers. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, she locked up the store and drove straight to Maple Street. This time, she didn't just watch from across the road. She parked directly in front of the library, got out of her car, and approached the iron gate. Up close, the building was even more imposing. 3 stories of red brick with arched windows and a heavy wooden door that looked like it belonged to a medieval castle. The ivy had claimed most of the facade, thick green vines that seemed almost alive in the fading daylight. Sarah touched the gate. It was cold, the rust flaking off under her fingers. She pushed gently, expecting resistance, but to her surprise it swung open with barely a whisper. Her heart quickened. This was trespassing, technically. The property was condemned. But the light was impossible to ignore. She walked up the stone path, dead leaves crunching under her feet. The air smelled of autumn, decaying wood, damp earth, the faint sweetness of forgotten flowers. As she reached the front door, she noticed something odd. There was no dust on the handle, no cobwebs across the doorway. The entrance looked maintained, as if someone had been using it recently. Sarah tried the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, half relieved, half disappointed. She was about to turn away when she heard it. A soft click, like a mechanism releasing. The door swung inward just a few inches, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. Every rational instinct told her to leave, to go home, to forget this foolishness. But Sarah had never been particularly good at listening to rational instincts. She pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Not the mustiness she'd expected, not the decay of abandonment, but the rich, comforting scent of old paper and leather. Books. Hundreds of them. Thousands, perhaps. Her eyes adjusted to the dimness, and she found herself in a grand entrance hall. A sweeping staircase curved upward to her right, and directly ahead, double doors stood open, leading to what had once been the main reading room. And there was the light. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a warm, golden glow that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. No lamps, no candles, just light. Sarah walked forward, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The reading room was enormous, 2 stories high with a vaulted ceiling. Bookshelves lined every wall, reaching up and up, filled with volumes in every size and color. In the center of the room stood long wooden tables, their surfaces polished and gleaming as if someone had just cleaned them. And on one of those tables, a single book lay open, as if waiting for her to read it. Sarah approached slowly. The book was old, its leather cover worn soft with age. The pages were yellowed but intact, covered in elegant handwriting. She leaned closer, trying to make out the words in the golden light. It was a journal of some kind, dated 1952. The handwriting was precise, almost artistic. Today, Mrs. Patterson returned the Austen collection. She wept as she handed them back to me. Her husband had read Pride and Prejudice to her every night during his illness. Now that he's gone, she says she can't bear to look at them. I told her the books would wait for her, that they would remember him too. She smiled, but her eyes remained sad. I placed the volumes on the shelf where they belong, where they will stay until she's ready to rediscover them. The library remembers everything. Sarah's breath caught. This was the writing of the last librarian, Margaret Hartley, the woman who had vanished in 1985, leaving behind nothing but questions. Sarah had researched her once, fascinated by the mystery. Margaret had been in her 60s when she disappeared, a quiet woman who dedicated her entire life to the library. One day she simply wasn't there anymore, the building locked, her belongings left behind in her small apartment above the reading room. Sarah turned the page, another entry, this one from 1967. Young Timothy Blake came in today after school. He sat in his usual corner, pretending to read but really just hiding from the world. I didn't disturb him. Sometimes the library is a sanctuary for those who need to disappear for a while. When he finally left, I found tears on the pages of his book. I carefully dried them and returned the volume to its place. Those tears are part of its story now, part of Timothy's story. The library holds all our stories. Entry after entry, Sarah read them. Decades of small moments, quiet interactions, the daily life of a library that had been the heart of a community. Margaret wrote about children discovering their first favorite books, about elderly couples who came to read newspapers together, about teenagers studying for exams, about lonely souls who found companionship among the shelves. Each entry was tender, observant, filled with a deep love for the people who walked through the doors. Then Sarah found the final entry, dated November 12th, 1985. I am tired, so very tired. I've been the keeper of these stories for 43 years, and I feel each one of them in my bones. But there is still work to be done. The library must continue. These books, these memories, they cannot be allowed to fade. I have made my choice. I will stay. Not as I was, but as I must be. The library needs a heart, and I will give it mine. Perhaps one day someone will come who understands. Someone who sees what I see, who feels what I feel. Until then, I will wait. I will keep the light burning. Sarah's hands trembled as she read those final words. The journal ended there, the rest of its pages blank. She closed the book carefully, her mind racing. Margaret hadn't disappeared. She'd chosen to stay. But what did that mean? How could she still be here? As if in answer, the light around Sarah brightened, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. She looked up, spinning slowly, trying to find the source. That's when she noticed them. The books were glowing. Not all of them, but scattered throughout the shelves. Certain volumes emitted a soft luminescence, different colors for different books. Blue, green, gold, rose, silver. The light she'd seen from outside wasn't from lamps or candles. It was from the books themselves, and each glowing book, she would soon learn, contained someone's forgotten story. Sarah moved toward the nearest shelf, drawn by a book that glowed pale blue. She pulled it out carefully. The cover was unmarked, no title or author, just soft leather the color of a summer sky. She opened it, and immediately the pages filled with text, appearing before her eyes as if being written by an invisible hand. Michael Chen, age 7. He loved dinosaurs more than anything in the world. His parents divorced when he was 6, and in the chaos, his collection of dinosaur books was packed away and never unpacked. He forgot about them eventually, forgot the names he'd memorized, the facts he'd known by heart. But here, those books remember, and so does the boy he was. Images formed in Sarah's mind as she read, not quite memories, but something close. She could see Michael, a small boy with glasses too big for his face, sprawled on a library floor surrounded by picture books of prehistoric creatures. She could feel his joy, pure and uncomplicated, the kind of happiness only children know. And then the sadness as that joy was lost, buried under the weight of grown-up problems he was too young to understand. Sarah closed the book, tears in her eyes. She pulled out another, this one glowing soft gold. Eleanor Simmons, age 72. She used to come every Tuesday to read poetry. Keats was her favorite. She would sit by the east window and read aloud to herself in a whisper, savoring each word. When she moved to a nursing home, she left her favorite volume behind by accident. She asked her son to retrieve it, but he forgot. Eleanor passed away believing her beloved book was lost forever. But it wasn't lost. The library kept it safe. It kept her love of Keats safe. It kept the woman she was safe, here in these pages. Again the visions came. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, her lips moving silently as she read, sunlight streaming through the window beside her. The peace on her face, the contentment, the small tragedy of a forgotten book, and the larger tragedy of a life ending with that tiny regret unresolved. Sarah understood now. The library wasn't just preserving books. It was preserving moments, relationships, the countless small connections between people and the stories they loved. Every volume that had ever been borrowed, every page that had ever been turned with care, every reader who had ever found comfort or joy or understanding within these walls, the library remembered them all. Margaret had given herself to this place, had somehow bound her own spirit to its purpose. She had become its heart, its consciousness, keeping the light alive so that these stories, these precious fragments of human experience, would never truly be lost. Sarah spent hours exploring the shelves, pulling out glowing books at random, reading the stories they contained. She found children who'd discovered worlds beyond their small town, teenagers who'd found solace during difficult times, adults who'd escaped into fiction when reality became too much, elderly people revisiting books from their youth. Each volume was a capsule of memory, a preserved moment of connection. As she read, Sarah began to notice something else. The books weren't just remembering. They were calling out, seeking. Each glowing volume wanted to be found again, wanted to reconnect with the person whose story it held. The library was trying to give these forgotten moments back to the people who'd lost them. But how could books find their way back to people who'd forgotten they existed? That's when Sarah realized why the library had shown itself to her. Margaret had written in her final entry that someone would come who understood. Sarah worked in a bookstore. She knew the magic of connecting the right book with the right reader. She understood that books were more than just paper and ink. They were vessels of experience, bridges between souls. The library had been waiting for someone like her, someone who could help these stories find their way home. Sarah walked back to the central table where Margaret's journal lay. She opened it to a blank page, and as she watched, words began to appear, elegant script forming across the yellowed paper. "You see now. You understand. Will you help them? Will you help me?" Sarah didn't hesitate. She found a pen in her bag and wrote beneath Margaret's words, "Yes, tell me what to do." The response came quickly. "Take the books that glow brightest, find their readers, return what was lost. The library cannot leave this place, but you can. Be the bridge, be the keeper of connections." Sarah looked around the vast room. Dozens of books glowed, but some were indeed brighter than others. She began gathering them, pulling the most luminous volumes from the shelves. A children's book about trains, a cookbook with pressed flowers between its pages, a collection of short stories with marginalia in 3 different handwritings, a poetry anthology held together with faded ribbon. Each book pulsed with light as she touched it, as if recognizing her intention. She found a canvas bag hanging by the door. Had it always been there? And filled it with the books. There were 15 in total, manageable enough to carry. As she slung the bag over her shoulder, the journal wrote one more message. "Thank you. The light will guide you." Sarah left the library as the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and when she tried the handle again, it was locked once more. But she could still see the glow through the windows, steady and warm, a beacon in the darkness. The next day was Saturday. Sarah opened the bookstore as usual, but instead of staying behind the counter, she laid out the 15 library books on a table near the window. She didn't put price tags on them. She didn't shelve them. She just let them sit there, glowing ever so faintly. Only she could see the light, she realized. An hour passed. 2. Then an elderly man came in, browsing the history section. Sarah watched as his path through the store seemed to curve, almost against his will, toward the table. His eyes landed on the cookbook, and his face went pale. That's impossible," he whispered. He picked up the book with shaking hands, opened it to find the pressed flowers still nestled between the pages. "My wife, she used to make recipes from this book. We borrowed it from the library decades ago, but when she got sick, we forgot to return it. After she passed, I searched everywhere for it. I just wanted to hold something she'd touched, something that had made her happy." Sarah smiled gently. "It's been waiting for you. Please take it." "But I should pay. It's already been paid for. A long time ago." The man left with tears streaming down his face, clutching the cookbook to his chest. As he walked out, Sarah noticed the book had stopped glowing. One by one, over the following weeks, people found their books. A middle-aged woman discovered the train book and remembered the son who'd loved trains before they drifted apart. She called him that evening, and they talked for 3 hours. A teenager found the poetry anthology and wept over her grandmother's handwriting in the margins. A young father claimed the short story collection and recalled the teacher who'd read those same stories to his class, the teacher who'd believed in him when no one else did. But not all the books found their original readers, and that was when Sarah learned the library's deepest secret. Some of the volumes ended up in the hands of people who'd never seen them before. A boy who'd never known his grandfather found a book about woodworking with notes in the margins. Notes that taught him not just how to build, but how to think like the grandfather he'd never met. A woman struggling with grief found a novel about loss and healing, its pages filled with underlined passages that spoke directly to her pain. The library wasn't just returning lost connections. It was creating new ones. It was taking the love, the joy, the understanding, that had been poured into these books by previous readers, and passing them on to those who needed them now. The stories weren't just being preserved. They were being continued, generation to generation, heart to heart. Sarah returned to the library every Friday night. Each time she found more glowing books waiting for her, and each time Margaret's journal had new entries describing the people who needed them. Sarah became the bridge between the library's memory and the living world, a keeper of forgotten connections, a matchmaker of souls and stories. Months passed. Then a year. Sarah's bookstore began to change. She started a section for donated books, encouraging people to leave volumes that had meant something to them, to write notes inside about why they mattered. The section grew quickly, filled with books that carried stories beyond their printed pages. People began coming to the store not just to buy books, but to share them, to pass on the treasures that had shaped them. One evening in October, exactly 1 year after Sarah had first entered the library, she found a new message in Margaret's journal. "You've done more than I ever hoped. The library's purpose is fulfilled through you. These stories are alive again, flowing through the world as they were meant to. I can rest now, but the library will always be here, and its doors will always open for you. You are its keeper now, its heart in the world beyond these walls." Sarah sat in the golden light, tears sliding down her cheeks. She'd never met Margaret Hartley, yet she felt as if she knew her intimately. This woman who'd loved books and people with such fierce devotion that she'd literally given herself to preserving their connection. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the empty room, to the light, to the spirit that lived in every book and shelf and shadow. "Thank you for choosing me." The light pulsed once, warm and gentle, like an embrace. Then it settled back to its steady glow, eternal and patient. Sarah continued her work. More books found their way out of the library and into the world. More connections were made, more lost loves rediscovered, more new relationships forged through the magic of shared stories. The library remained at the edge of town, glowing softly every night, a beacon for those who needed it. People began to talk, of course. Some called it a ghost story, the haunted library of Millbrook, where a librarian's spirit kept the lights on. Others said it was just faulty wiring, an electrical quirk in an old building. But a few, those who'd received books from Sarah's little table, knew better. They knew the truth that couldn't quite be spoken aloud, but could be felt in the weight of a beloved book, in the comfort of a well-worn page, in the spark of recognition when words on paper spoke directly to your soul. Books remember, libraries remember, and love, once given to a story, never truly dies. It just waits in the golden light, patient and eternal, until someone comes along who needs it, who's ready to receive it, who understands that a forgotten book is never really forgotten. It's just sleeping, dreaming of the moment when it will wake again and find its way home. And sometimes, late at night when the town was asleep, Sarah would stand outside the library and watch its windows glow, knowing that inside, among the shelves and shadows, Margaret was still there, still keeping watch, still loving every book and every story and every person who'd ever found magic within those walls. Years turned like pages. Sarah grew older, her hair threading with silver, her hands developing the same gentle care with books that Margaret must have had. She trained others to recognize the glowing volumes, to understand the library's purpose, to serve as bridges between lost stories and seeking hearts. The bookstore became a landmark in Millbrook, known throughout the region as a place where books found you as much as you found them. Sarah never married, never had children of her own. But she didn't feel the lack. She had thousands of children. Every person who received a book from the library, every soul who rediscovered a lost connection, every reader who found comfort in pages that remembered them. She was a keeper of stories, a guardian of memories, a living link in an endless chain of love and understanding. One cold December evening, when Sarah was 70 years old, she returned to the library with the last glowing book in her bag. It had taken months to find the right person for this particular volume, a slim book of fairy tales with illustrations hand-colored by a child. Finally, she'd matched it with a young woman who'd recently become a mother, who needed to remember the magic of stories, the power of reading aloud, the gift of wonder passed from generation to generation. Sarah placed the empty bag on the central table and sat down heavily in a chair. She was tired, so very tired. She'd been the keeper for 40 years now, and she felt each one of them in her bones. The reading room was warm despite the winter cold outside, the golden light as steady as ever. Margaret's journal lay open, as it always did. Sarah pulled it toward her and read the latest entry, written in that familiar, elegant script. "Well done, faithful keeper, well done. The work continues, as it always will, as it must. But every keeper must rest eventually. I waited so long, and now I know the peace of letting go. When you're ready, the library will accept your gift as it accepted mine. We will be the light together, you and I, keeper and keeper, heart and heart." Sarah smiled, understanding. She wasn't afraid. She'd lived a full life, a meaningful one. She'd connected thousands of stories to thousands of readers. She'd kept the library's purpose alive in the world. And now, like Margaret before her, she could become part of that purpose more completely. But not yet. There was still time. Time for a few more books, a few more connections, a few more nights of watching the library glow and knowing that somewhere in Millbrook, someone was opening a volume that had been waiting just for them. Sarah stood, her joints protesting, and walked slowly through the reading room. She ran her fingers along the spines of books, felt the thrum of stories within them, the pulse of remembered love and forgotten joy. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, where the children's section lived, where so many young lives had first discovered the magic of reading. Here, the glow was different. Brighter, more playful, filled with colors she had no names for. Books about dragons and spaceships, about talking animals and brave children, about worlds where anything was possible. Sarah had spent countless hours in this section over the years, finding just the right book for just the right child, watching young faces light up with wonder. She remembered a boy, maybe 8 years old, who'd been struggling to read. He'd been ashamed, hiding his difficulty from friends and teachers. Sarah had given him a glowing book, a simple adventure story about a kid who couldn't read, but discovered he could hear what books were thinking. The boy had devoured it in one night, then come back for more. He was in college now, studying to be a teacher, sending Sarah occasional letters about his favorite books. That was the magic. Not just returning what was lost, but planting seeds that would grow for decades, that would spread and branch and bloom in ways she'd never see. Sarah descended the stairs and returned to the journal. She picked up her pen and wrote, "Not yet, Margaret, not yet, but soon. When the time is right, when I've found my successor, when the chain is unbroken, then I'll join you in the light, and together we'll keep watch forever. Together we'll remember. Together we'll love these books and these people and these stories that make us human." The light pulsed 3 times, warm and approving. A promise. A pact. Sarah left the library that night and locked the door behind her. But she would return. She always returned. Because the library wasn't just a building full of books. It was a living testament to the connections between us, to the ways stories bind us together across time and distance, to the truth that nothing truly loved is ever truly lost. Somewhere in Millbrook, a child was opening a book and discovering a world beyond imagining. Somewhere, an elderly person was revisiting a treasured story and finding new meaning in familiar words. Somewhere, 2 strangers were reading the same page and unknowingly sharing a moment, a thought, a feeling. And in the old library on Maple Street, the lights burned steadily, golden and eternal, kept alive by a woman who'd given her heart to books and by another who would soon do the same. The stories continued, the memories endured, the library remembered, and love, once given to words on a page, lived forever in the glow.